I'm actually very anxious to hear what you have to say about this team, which is obviously Lamar Jackson-led, and just mentioning his name causes all kinds of opinions from people.
It really does. Their free agency was not widespread, but it was definitely quality. They brought in offensive guard Kevin Zeitler. They brought in offensive tackle Alejandro Villanueva, and then they brought in wide receiver Sammy Watkins. They also brought in an offensive tackle in Juwan James for depth. So while it wasn't huge, it was definitely needed for them a ton. What they did in free agency, certainly going to be put to good use there. Draft picks, first round, they had two different first-round picks. Rashad Bateman, of course, the wide receiver, where everybody was saying, hey, the Ravens really need a wide receiver. Ravens really need a wide receiver. They went. They got Rashad Bateman in the first round. They also took linebacker Odafe Owe in the first round. And then they took Ben Cleveland they had 2/3 as well. They took Ben Cleveland, who's an offensive guard. They'd have a corner, Brandon Stevens, who they took in the third round as well. And they took another wide receiver in the fourth round who actually supposedly, if we read beat writers, very rarely do beat writers ever come out and be like, man, this guy really stinks. They don't ever write any of that stuff, right?
Because they have a livelihood to worry about.
Yeah, man, this guy really looks terrible. And according to beat writers, Tylan Wallace was a guy they took in the fourth round, a wide receiver. And, again, beat writers coming out, maybe looking at this through rose-colored glasses, but saying that he looks really good and should be able to fit somewhere in the rotation and should be able to get some playing time with them. If you look where they finished up last year, 11th overall DVOA offense, 9th overall DVOA defense. According to ESPN, they have the 5th best roster top to bottom heading into the season. So, PFF kind of backs that up as well. Fourth power rated team as we head into the 2021 season with a 5% Super Bowl win probability. So that's one of the highest ones that we've heard since we've been doing these previews here. That said, they do only have them projected at 9.8 wins. So like right at 10 wins. And so it has them under their season win total 69% of the time. And so here's the other thing. So I look back and we see that they were, 11-5 last season. Then you go and you kind of look back at their schedule. They had to win their final 5 games.
Yeah.
To get to that 11-5 record. And you look and through those wins were wins over the Cowboys, the Jaguars, the Giants, and the Bengals.
Not a murderer's row.
The only quality win in there was a 5-point battle against the Browns. But 4 of the 5 teams that they played were non-playoff teams.
Yeah.
To get to that 11-5. So you start to look and, that you see that number there sitting at 11, and it makes you wonder if you should have a fairly decent lean to the under, especially if you are, like I am, bullish on the Browns. So if you think the Browns are going to be an extremely tough out for them and a very real possibility they could even be swept by the Browns in that division, then I think it's at least something for us to consider with this Ravens team, where I think we kind of just automatically just give them the, and I think we might be in a situation where you play the under and at worst you push. Like an 11-6 for this team. I don't know.
I hear what you're screaming there.
Yeah.
I get that. I have a couple questions. One, Rashad Bateman, who it could be argued was one of these guys who stayed in college and it hurt his draft position, because the year before Minnesota had a great year of football, which was sort of an anomalous year for them, where they flirted with the Big Ten championship. Rashad Bateman was phenomenal. And so getting him at 27, it's a great draft pick. They ended up with him and, as you mentioned, Sammy Watkins in free agency. Were you surprised, and maybe it's because of those two guys that they had gotten and had their eyes on, that they weren't there wasn't more of a flirtation with Julio Jones? I thought they were the big loser in that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe they were because both those guys are projected to start, obviously.
Right.
Like Sammy Watkins going to start, Rashad Bateman's going to start. That basically bumps Miles Boykin out of the rotation, where he just never really lived up to anything once he got to the NFL. Devin DuVernay, another guy that they tried on later on in the draft as a wide receiver, he never really, panned out either. So here in comes Rashad Bateman, in comes Sammy Watkins, and honestly, what I'm hearing is this Tylan Wallace actually is probably the 4th guy in line there. Hollywood Brown, of course, the other wide receiver that they have that's going to be starting for them. So yeah, I mean, they certainly could have used a Julio Jones. I don't think there's any doubt about it. And I think maybe you're saying though, that maybe they just got content because they were, look, we spent the money on Watkins, we drafted Bateman. Like, maybe we don't want to have just too many of these guys.
The other thing is that, and again, I'm not going to dismiss the fact that, were it not for that pick six at the end of the third quarter against the Bills, they had a real shot at beating the Bills in the playoffs. But let's just take a broader viewpoint rather than remember their final game of last season in the postseason. What's the main thing we say about the Ravens year after year under Lamar Jackson is this, that when they're ahead in a football game, they are awfully tough to run down because they're great front runners with a guy like that who's multidimensional. On the other hand, when they fall behind, not so much for the same reasons, right? The same skill set that makes them hard to catch doesn't necessarily make them the most, adept at coming back. Is there anything about their moves that make you think that can be bucked?
I mean, I think that certainly the front runner thing probably still holds true because not only do you have Lamar Jackson at quarterback, I mean, look, you still just have second-year guy J.K. Dobbins who proved to be the best in that backfield.
And I've always thought he was underrated, even at Ohio State.
Yeah, towards the end of the season, he proved that he should have been starting from day one. I mean, they let Mark Ingram walk, obviously, so that's done. They did re-sign Gus Edwards. So, I mean, like, Gus Edwards is going to be there. So you got that, like, back-to-back kind of like two-person tandem there with that. And then you look at this offensive line. I mean, it's a 12th rated offensive line as they head into the season. But look, they get Ronnie Staley back healthy. He only played 312 snaps last season. They did trade Orlando Brown to the Chiefs, but then they signed Alejandro Villanueva as well. So he comes in to replace. Now, he's played left tackle his whole career, so he's going to have to move to right tackle. But I don't think that is going to be that big of a deal there. So Villanueva goes in and fills that gap that Orlando Brown has. Then they bring in Zeitler again as a big signing, who's going to be a nice interior offensive lineman for them as well. Bradley Bozeman actually gets to move over from left guard. He was not all that great at left guard. He's going to move to play center because they drafted Ben Cleveland, who's going to move in to play guard. So if anything, they upgraded this line as a whole by getting back Staley from injury, then making the signings that they made, and then being able to move Bozeman over to center from guard, and that should create a better guard position as well with Ben Cleveland there. So I mean, I think that this is overall a better line there, and I think they can still play bully ball for sure.